scaling is literally just a math equation too. Like, are your is your revenue able to increase faster than your expenses? And so we can like know this math in our business. But a lot of people don't take the time to do this math. So like, do you know how much it costs to have a client is like a first question, like how much time does it take to onboard a client? How much team time are you paying for there? How much of your time does it take to support in a programmer? Like how much of the software you're paying for supports that programmer? How much are you paying a support coach to be in that program? Whatever that is, like you can know with relative certainty how much it even costs to run a program in your business. And that's such an important starting point for so much of this because it's like, what's going to tell you if you actually have a program that makes sense to scale, right? If you get a ton of people in there, but that means you have to employ so many more people and your expenses are raising at the same rate, if not faster, that is not scaling just because you have a big program. So that's like one that I think is always helpful to start with because I feel like a lot of people don't even look at that. Like when they're designing a program or building a program, they're not even thinking about like what does it cost to run this program. Um, So that's one bucket. We'll get into the buckets though about growth, but I think that that is an important one because if you know how much it costs, you can make a lot of decisions from there around how you can grow it or where you want to grow it or what makes sense to grow it or even like what gaps you would want to solve in your client journey. Like do you then need a higher level offer or that kind of stuff? For example, one of my clients has a very successful membership, but at the end of the day, like the profit is entirely in retention. And so we know that within like the first 4 months of that membership, it's not that profitable. Like we need to get people past that for it to ultimately be more profitable. That's really, really helpful to know because it informs most of the decisions we would make about what happens in those 4 months, what happens at the 4 month mark, what do we do? How do we plan the content? Like all of content of the membership. How do we incentivize them staying? What check-in points do they need past that, right? Like, so the numbers inform a lot of the strategy if you start with them. So another version of this that I feel like we often don't talk about is conversion percentage. So this is such a big one for so many people, and they tend to ignore it the most, I think, when it comes to scaling, because when we think of scaling, we often think volume. So we're usually like, how can I get more people? How can I add more programs? How can I Like it's always almost volume related that people's brains go to. However, volume typically takes money. Okay. So to get much, much, much more volume, there's often a decent investment related to that, whether that's like going to be an investment in a lot more team support to like help your organic social efforts or an investment in ads or whatever, right? Volume typically equals investment. Or say you're expanding and making 3 new programs, like there's typically an investment in like, okay, those sales pages, those things, like you get what I'm saying, right? Volume typically equals more investment. Something like conversion percentage is really interesting because it has no cost typically with it, unless of course you're hiring a sales team or something, right? But that really just means the people that are already in front of you, how good are you at converting them? And if you don't have a great number there, the rest of scaling is going to be hard. Because then when you start spending money for volume, if your conversion percentage isn't great, you're literally just burning money, right? You're getting more people in that you still haven't figured out how to convert. You're just lighting money on fire over and over. And so this is another one of those like boring math pieces is like, do you know your conversion percentage and are you pretty heavily focused there as a starting point? Now, everyone needs to focus at different pieces of their funnel based on like their specific setup. But if I'm just giving general feedback, I'd say this is such an important one for scaling because if that's good, probably means it starts to make sense to put money into volume. If that's not good, you putting money into volume is almost always going to make it very hard to scale because you're actually significantly increasing your expense without knowing that you can increase your revenue. Does that make sense? Like when you put money into ads, you should be putting it in because you're relatively certain that more people coming in will increase your revenue and offset and expand past that ads cost. Do you get what I'm saying? So when we're talking conversion percentage, that is sort of like this linchpin piece. Now, someone may want to run ads and be like, I'm just paying for data, which is fine, but that's not scaling. Okay. It's definitely okay to pay for data, but like we can't pretend that's what's going to truly scale your business. I mean, the data might inform what you do to scale your business, but that expense isn't unless you know your conversion percentage is in a good place. So many people don't even know what their conversion percentage is, right? And so this is why we're so often kind of feeling like we're like shooting from the hip in business, is because we can't even say for sure. We're like, I don't know, I think I convert pretty well, or I don't know, I don't think I convert that well. Like, we should know that because that is going to inform, that is the domino for almost every other decision you're going to want to make related to scaling. My conversion percentage is fantastic once I actually get people on a call with me. Getting people on the call is a problem. Perfect, right? So it's like you might be in a position then where you're like, I know putting money into ads, traffic, social, whatever, and getting more volume in is so worth it because even if my fantastic percentage goes down a little bit, I'm still going to make that up with a high level of conversion, right? So you don't have to share what it is, Rebecca, but if you want to share what it is, we can like even do math on it. But like a lot of times people will get really frustrated with that. They'll be like, oh, my conversion is so good, but I can't get volume. And I'm like, well, if your conversion is so good, you're in quite a safe position to try for a volume or to spend money on volume. Like, I see that happen with a lot. I have a client that came to me at the beginning of this year, or last year rather, sorry, the beginning of last year. And we started working together and she was like, yeah, I want to figure out how to scale, but I'm like really confused. I don't know what's next, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at all of her numbers and I was like, your conversions are fucking insane. Like, why haven't you, done ads or why haven't you done any of this stuff? And she was like, I didn't even know they were insane. Like, I knew I like could make money and was like pretty good at it, but like I had no idea they were even that good. And I was like, they're so good. Definitely we need to focus on social and ads. She's done both of those things and like massively expanded her business. And it was like, I'm not saying ads aren't ever risky, but like in her case, and this is kind of like the math I did with her, I'm like, they're not that risky because even if your conversion percentage drops by 5 fucking points, like it's still so good. Right? Um, Oh, thank you, Nova. Okay, I'm gonna try to give some nitty gritty. Hey, Sarah, it's good to see you. For therapy, if someone reaches out, I convert like 75% of people. For coaching, it's lower because it's not covered by insurance. Totally. So like let's just use that. Let's say it's, say coaching's 50% or whatever. If you hold on, I'm gonna try to do this live. We'll see if this works. All right. If you know 50% of people that get on calls with you convert, and let's say your program's like $4,000. Okay, we'll just make stuff up here. Then that means if you spent, let's just say you're going to go nuts, you're going to spend $10,000. And let's say it's even $10 a lead, which would be high. So you're going to get 1,000 leads. Let's say even 3% of them. Let's go even lower. Let's go 2% book a call. Okay. Do not make fun of me. I'm doing this math. It's 20, right? Yes. Okay. This is so embarrassing. No, it's 200. No, that's 20. That's okay. It's 20. Kill me. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. Oh wait, it's 3,000. Okay, let's go 3,000. Say 20 book a call and you convert at 50%. Okay. So that means you converted 10 people at $3,000, right? That's 30K. And you still only spent 10K on ads, right? So technically you've made $20,000, right? Just by adding volume, but only because your percentage was so high. Does that make sense? Like, I think so many of us don't realize how much we could play with and experiment with scaling in those ways if we are protected by a really, really good conversion rate, right? Especially in a sense of like a several $1,000s program like that, right? So just an example, I'm not saying you need to go spend $10,000 in ads, Rebecca, but like, I think that that's a really good illustration of how high conversion percentages are so important in scaling. Obviously, sometimes we can have a funnel that's converting at 3% and we're really happy with that. So I'm not saying that that's always the case, but typically it's converting at 1 to 3% when we're getting into volume, right? We want it converting better than that before we add a lot of volume. I mean, obviously, again, it all depends on the math, depends on what your program costs and all of those things, right? You could spend $10,000 on ads and sell one $10,000 program, and that could be enough too. But the point I really want to make, and that I think Rebecca's demonstrates for us so well, is that I think a lot of us feel, and I know I have had this experience in business sometimes too, of like that frustration of like, oh, if I get someone on a call, like I can sign a client. I just like, how do I get more people on calls? And I think what we forget is how empowered we are to do that when we have a high conversion percentage. It is so much scarier to spend money on ads or services like that when our conversion percentage is low because we just don't know, you know? Um, so that's like one piece that I think is really, really important. Highly recommend like making that a big piece of the math you're mathing all the time. And then again, you can just run like a little sequence like I just did of being like, okay, well, let's just play with numbers. What if I spend $10,000? What might that get me? What would that look like? You know, and a 3x on ads like that, most people are very happy with. You know, like you could run a very successful business off of 3x return on ad spend. Do you know what I mean? So that's a piece. All right, let me get out of my math here. Another like piece of the conversion that then comes next is retention. I think this is also a math number that not a lot of people pay attention to. And like, listen, not everybody's model is based on retention. However, I think like for most things, retention from a client perspective doesn't even have to be in the same program, does really matter. So like maybe you get them into a small program and then they like upsell into a bigger program or whatever. Or if you have a membership, obviously retention is the most important thing. Or even if you have one-on-one, like I feel like when we think about scaling, again, I'll come back to what I keep saying, which is we always think about volume. But retention is such a huge part of scaling because it doesn't cost more money to acquire that client. Right. So the example we just used, Rebecca, it costs money to acquire all of those clients. It could be money that we're absolutely happy to spend, but nonetheless, it costs money. When you're retaining, you've pretty much taken away that cost. You've also taken off the cost of onboarding, right? Like you might have to resign or something like that, but like typically the lift it requires from like team, time, energy to retain a client versus to get a new one is like really significant. And I think a lot of us forget this. And I think we're so quick to almost like ignore retention because it just feels like, oh yeah, it'd be nice if people stay, but I need more. I need volume, right? Um, but your retention number is one of the biggest things that's going to impact your profit because again, for that reason, it's not costing more, right? And so when we think about scaling, that's what we have to think about. Like, how much does all of this cost me, right? Um, yes, thank you, Megan. Retention is a huge part of scaling, doesn't cost money to acquire the client, right? Like when you take away that cost, that really matters a lot. So let me give you a few examples. In a lit up life, right? We have a huge, like I would say the reason we scale and make money is yes, because we do profit share with client, but the only reason that works is because of retention. Like every single thing that works about a lit up life finds its way back to retention. Like I could be like, oh, it's because of profit share, but right, the more I retain a client, the more I'm gonna get revenue share off that. Like, and the larger the revenue share portion will be because it's like through after our work together. So what a revenue percentage looks like at months versus what it looks like at a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years is vastly different. So even that comes back to retention, or like, oh, we have a long wait list, comes back to retention. Like, oh, we don't have to have a ton of volume, comes back to retention. Oh, we only have to sign like a few clients a year, comes back to retention. Like every single thing about what has worked and scaled my business centers this single number. And obviously not everyone has my business model. I'm not saying that's always true, but I do think this number is the influencer of scaling so much more than most businesses will acknowledge unless you have huge volume. But again, like how much are you spending for that volume? Like that's worth thinking about. And so when you're thinking about scaling this, the math on retention, math so good. Okay. So this is just a piece like I would go back to. So like let's even go, hold on, let me see if I can get back here. Let's even go with Rebecca's example. Okay. So we're assuming she signed 10 clients at 3,000. Well, now let's assume that 5 of those clients resign, right? Um, so then she's at 45,000 that she's now making off that one $10,000 ad spend, right? And then if we continue to follow that out and say then even 2 more resign or whatever, right? She could be at 50 plus $1,000 off that one 10K ad spend because retention adds so much and you didn't have to spend more. So, right, we were happy with like, oh yeah, we'll make 30K off 10K. That's awesome. But what if we made 45K off 10K? What if we made 51K off 10K? Like that is where it really starts to get interesting. Thank you. Happy Monday. It just like again it's kind of boring math because it's like not as fun as being like okay and then what if we spent x amount more and and got all these people like that could be fun too but this version of the math is really good and really fun and really makes all of this feel worth it. So again, if you know you're good at conversion and you know you're good at retention, it is so fucking easy to get volume in and make that work for you. Like it's almost like a can't lose game. And I don't want to say that entirely, but it like, I mean, again, you can see with the numbers here, like even if only one person resigned, even if whatever, like you're still winning in a lot of ways on this and you're making a lot of traction happen off of that one spend by being good at conversions and by being good at retention. Um, Rebecca said, I love this, but what if part of my business model is to eventually empower them out of needing support? It's not like not just as a therapist, but also as an ADHD coach. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, like, I think that what I would say is like, even like the math I just did was only on like people resigning once. So like it's totally, you don't need them to resign forever, right? And then also, like, that's something to think about is like maybe they don't need that level of support, but like, do they need some kind of support or do they need check-in calls or do they need a community or like, there's other ways to think about that too that can scale what you already have versus just feeling like, okay, I have to be in this constant churn. Just as we love a can't lose game, they feel very hard to come by these days. I get that. Yes, Rebecca, perfect. The goal is 9 months of support. Okay, so even better. Like 9 months of support, if we're talking was 3K for 3 months, right? So 9 months is 9K, right? So off that one 10K in ad spend, if those people resign for 9 months, like we're talking a totally different game, right? 9. I'm not even trying to math that. It's fine. You get my point. Like that is okay. Like we don't need them to stay forever. That is definitely not the goal. But like the reason the math gets interesting there is because if you go, okay, well, if I spend 10K on ads, it gets me 1,000 leads, it gets me 10 clients. And on average, 8 of those clients will stay on for 9 months. I can do the math on that. That's 72K. Right. And so then you can feel more confident going and making that ad spend because you're like, well, within 9 months, we'll probably get 72K out of that. That starts to really like make a lot of sense. Right. And to me, like that's what we're really talking about with scalability. It doesn't mean they have to stay forever, but it does mean you're not just like, not you, anyone is not overly focused on just that 3K, right? It's like, what else does that 3K give us? Because when you're thinking about 10K in ad spend and you're like, yeah, but my program's only 3K, it can feel, ooh, but when you're thinking about all the other numbers around that, like, yeah, it's 10K in ad spend, but I convert at 50% and my retention rate is whatever, 60%. And on average, they retain for 9 months. And so, like, you can really see how that all starts to like make a ton of sense. Um, Megan said, this is my question too. My members outgrow it because I'm doing my job right. Yes. I think that what is like so helpful to think about there is like, just again, do the math. Like, if you're like, okay, my members tend to outgrow within whatever, a year, 18 months, like, you can still know, okay, so on average, I get X in terms of lifetime value from a member. What can I reasonably do or spend on or focus on to get more members in if we know we can retain them for X amount of time? Do you know what I mean? Um, but I think that that's like, it's sort of just like a math piece. This is convincing me to do that. Literally no pressure, but also like if your conversion rate is that good and your retention rate is good, like and volume is your problem, like that might be a really good solution. Um, so yeah, what was I saying? Oh, like the members outgrow. It really is okay. It's just like for me, like, um, kind of similarly, like I've taken clients to $1 million and then they're like, okay, my business is kind of like a well-oiled machine. I'm good. Great. But like that was so worth like that, them being with me for that time and the revenue share they paid. Like there's no, we need to keep them forever to make it make sense. It's just more like, is retention an important part of our model? And do we know on average what our like value is out of that? Because from there, so much easier to figure out the rest in terms of scaling. Where most people go wrong with scaling is they're not focused on conversion percentage, they're not focused on retention, they're so focused on volume, and then they're like, ads don't work for me. And it's like, well, no, your conversion wasn't working for you. Or they're like, I'm like so over invested. And it's like, yeah, because you invested before like these other pieces were working well enough that it would have been hard to lose on ads, right? Yeah, good. Yeah, both of them are great. Like, I agree. I think that it's like, or if you don't want it to be ads, it could be another version. Like maybe you invest heavily in, growing organically or whatever. But like for you, you don't want to keep focused on those if they're already that good. You want to be like, cool, everything I do should be focused on volume because those are so good. Where for other people, it should be the opposite. Like, why the fuck are we focused on volume if these two need our attention? That would make such a difference. Um, so it gets real good when that happens. What else do I want to talk about here? We already talked about return on ad spend. We could talk about that a little bit more though. I think another thing that I see happen when people are trying to scale is they're like, okay, cool. Okay, actually, let me use myself as an example because I think I'm a really good example here. So I've talked about this a little bit, but we actually started doing ads this year because one of my clients teaches like it's like done with you ads coaching, which is like super cool. And Taylor, my OBM, really wanted like kind of another project this year because last year she was consumed, I think is a fair way to put it, with our event. And so she was like, hey, like what's next kind of thing. And I was like, it'd be really nice to have this skill set in our business, especially if I want to do any master classes, et cetera, this year. She really wanted to skill develop. So I hired Amanda to teach Taylor ads. And so we're currently running ads to module one of my mini course, which then sells a $99 course. Now, I don't even have spots, right? In some ways, that's dumb because I'm never going to get the return on ad spend from that in a like really obvious way. But I will over time. And I think like it's a great thing. But how I'm thinking about that is it's just like an expense in our business that's going to team development and marketing. And our business has the profit margin to withstand that team and marketing expense. But, and here's the piece I want to say, I do believe that that $99 course is going to offset a lot of our ad spend, but I'm going in with the realistic expectation of it only offsetting around, like my goal, I would say would be like 50 to 70% of our ad spend. And so I say that because where I think a lot of people also go wrong in scaling is they think if they do ads to a $99 program, they're actually going to make money on that. And then they get really frustrated when they're not like making a ton of money off these small things and they're not seeing the bigger picture. But the truth is, unless you're, I mean, I think for me at this point, if not more, like your program has to be, or you have to be able to sell into something that's over $1,000 for the math to math on ads right now, and maybe even higher than that. Um, or it's just an offset, right? And so that's another piece I wanted to say about the mathing. Like a lot of people will just be like, oh my God, people love my $99 course. I'm going to run ads to it. And they haven't done any of the math on like, oh, okay, well, if it's $10 a lead and I only convert X percentage of them and then X percentage by the course and da da da, like how, I'm not gonna make that money up at all. Um, like, and they get like, oh my God, see, this can't work for me. And it's like, we kind of go back to that. Well, but do you have an offer over $1,000? Are you good at converting into it? And do you then retain? If you do, losing money on the front end isn't even lost money, right? If you don't, losing money on the front end is business, like is burning your business down, right? Like it's literally just, throwing money at Meta for no real reason. And so I wanted to say that too, because that is just such a math game. And I think it is so easy for people to just get excited and be like, oh, I see other people run it too low ticket. I have a low ticket offer. I'm going to run it there without doing the math behind it to be like, what actually fucking makes sense here? Lily said, yes, it's hard. I tried it last week with a lower ticket product and it was not worth it. Yep, totally. Low ticket can offset your ads cost, but you need strong email marketing to convert into higher ticket. Exactly. Like, and even if it just offsets part of your ads cost, like that can be a big win for you, right? Like if you're like, oh, I only have to, like, technically my leads are 50% off. Let's look at it like that. Do you want 50% off leads? That can be a big win. But when we're going into these things thinking that this is what is going to like make us all this money without actually looking at the math behind it, I think is where some people get so frustrated with scaling. And there are so many things that they think like don't work or whatever. But it's really because there's a much bigger strategy to it and there's so much more math to it. So I feel like when I see all these people being like, oh, just create a product and run ads to it, I'm like, kind of, but no. um, and I think it puts a lot of people in a position where they've spent a ton of money on traffic and they like don't know why they can't scale. That's a lot of why. Okay, the other piece I wanted to talk about as it related to scaling is yes, conversion, yes, retention. Um, so what I was saying earlier is it's not always about volume, and it's really not, especially Jess, I miss running ads in 2020. Oh my God, same. I think about that all the time. I'm like, I should have just dumped like $50,000 into ads back in like 2019. Like, I can't even imagine. But that's kind of my next point is I feel like a lot of people will dabble with stuff like this as it relates to scaling. And the truth is, and I think we see this in our industry a lot, but we don't realize what we're seeing. Low ad spend is really hard to make a lot of money off of. And I know that that can sound sort of like duh, but like a lot of people want to get into ads and then they want to be like, you should have cashed out. I know. A lot of people want to get into ads and they want to be like, okay, I'm going to spend $500 a month. Great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you think you're building like whatever, 50K a month funnel off that, you're not because the math doesn't math, right? Like most of the people that we're seeing in our industry where we're like, oh my God, she runs ads and she's blowing up and I see her everywhere. I guarantee you they're probably spending 25K or more every month on ads. There's nothing wrong with that. But equally, like most people are scared to play that game or don't want to play that game, which is fine. You don't have to, but you can't compare yourself to that game. Like so many people that are running $500 a month of ads are looking at people running $25,000 a month in ads and being like, why does she make so much money and I don't? And I'm not saying that like, oh my God, they're dumb. I'm saying that like, this is how much we don't do math in our industry, right? And if you've ever done the math on like ads, for example, right? At the, let me see how I can explain this. At the bottom tier here, let's say like bottom tier of spend, your conversion and shit matters so much. As you scale way, way, way up, you could be converting at 1% and still make a boatload of money from that because like the math at that level of volume, but it requires a very, very high volume. Does that make sense? And so like when you look at it, it's like you're almost like, wait, wouldn't it just be like a straight line? Like, oh, if I spend a little more, I'll make a little bit more, whatever. And it's not. It's like exponential when you're spending a lot. But like most people would be scared to spend that much, right? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying like we cannot keep making these things comparable. So if we're talking about 25K a month in ad spend, right? We're talking about someone is willing to put out 300K a year on the bet that they could make a million off that or whatever. If you're putting out 300K a year and you even convert somewhat good, it's probably a really, really, really strong opportunity that you're going to make a million off that. But it takes a lot. And I feel like that's what, again, doesn't always get talked about. It's just how, like, a lot of people are just saying, oh, yeah, like put money into a low ticket offer. But we're not talking about, like, hey, does math on that? Same with the big numbers. Like, does the math on the big numbers? Yeah. But like, what does that require from you to feel safe doing that? Like, this is sort of the thing that I think is like the math underbelly of all of this that like we all need to be like acknowledging more. Again, let's just take that 300K. So say in a year, even 1% of those people buy from you. So you get 3,000 people to buy from you in a year. Even if you only got them to buy $1,000 offer, you just need $3 million, right? Like, but you only had to convert at 1% to get there. That's why the maths at those big levels, right? Um, but when we're trying to get it to math here, it's just different, right? So we have to realize these are vastly different games. We have to like be willing to acknowledge that and decide what we want to scale. Like someone might be like, oh, I would way rather invest that and hit those huge numbers fast and by all means, right? Other people would be like, wait, I never want to spend 25K on ads a month. Like that does not feel good to me or my nervous system or my values or whatever. Also fine. But like we have to acknowledge that they're different games, right? Yeah, Manali, I love that. Math is only gonna ever math. That's so good. This is why math isn't math with my cute 223 person email list. Exactly, Rebecca. Like that's the perfect thing to see, right? It's like you don't have like an insert anything problem except a numbers problem. Like, right? Like your conversions are good, your retention is good. You literally just have a numbers game problem, right? And for so many of us, when we can simplify it down to that, it's so much easier to solve, or it's so much easier to find the logic in, which kind of brings me to the mindset part. Is I feel like so often we're scared to look at numbers because we think they're going to give us scary answers. But what I always try to remind people is like the numbers are just telling you what's already there. Like the numbers aren't making anything be there, right? They're just like actually telling you what is there. And so the sooner you realize that they're not there to scare you, they're always there to tell you the truth. And as soon as you want the truth, everything gets easier. Like truly, it's so much easier to be like, okay, let me just like pull up my calculator and do a little bit math here. Oh yeah, if I had, 2,223 people on my list instead of 223, I'd be making 5 times what I'm making. Okay, well, if that's true, what does it take to get 2,000 people on my list? Like it really changes how you look at business and how you start to operate and how you start to problem solve. And so I just want to say that, like, I'm not a math girl either. Like, what did I do on here? I did 2% of 1,000 on my fucking calculator, you know? I'm not a math girl, but I just see how much it matters for this stuff. Like, it's sort of like, I think we look up to some of these people in our industry that grew a long time ago and have these huge audiences, and we're like, oh, what do they know that I don't know? And it's like they just got volume a long ass time ago, and it's easy to maintain when you have that level of volume, or like, oh, they're just spending 25K a month on ads. Like, everything you see starts to make sense. If, right? You're not like, oh, what does she have that I don't have? You're like, oh, her math, that tracks. Right. And by the way, all of this is like knowable and seeable. You can literally go in and go to a Facebook account and see what ads someone's running. I mean, you obviously can't see how much they're spending on them, but like you can be like, oh, that person runs a ton of ads. This makes sense. Or you could be like, oh, she has 1 million followers. Of course, that's different, you know? Um, and like when you can look at anything and just kind of answer that question, and like to what Manali said, the math will always math. Um, it just depersonalizes all of this so much. And it helps you like actually solve for the right scaling problem in your business, which like maybe it is volume, but for a lot of people it's not. Or maybe you realize like, oh wow, I'm so good on retention and conversion that actually like I can do almost anything I want to get more volume and that's going to work. Like it's a really empowering thing no matter how you slice it. And it really helps you actually put in the work and the money in the right place. Because what I see happen a lot is when people don't know their numbers, and say they are obsessed with volume, they'll just keep throwing money at the volume thing over and over again. Because it's like that's the problem they want to solve instead of like, is that the problem they need to solve, or vice versa. Like when you're really good at conversion, sometimes you're like, or retention, you're like, oh, what else can I do for my clients? Or what else can I give my clients? Or and it's like, you do not have a retention problem. Like, why are like, that's not where we should be like pouring a bunch of money, time, and energy, right? So all that to say, scaling is math. When you know the math, you can make really, really good, really neutral decisions that feel so depersonalized because it's literally just a return on ad spend number, it's a retention percentage, it's a conversion percentage, it's a profit, it's a whatever, right? Um, and I think, the same thing, we didn't really talk about this a ton, although this is like an obvious one. The same thing goes with profit. Like when you can just see, like, wait, does all this money I'm spending make sense and get me what I want? Or like, would it actually be better if I even made less, but like took out all of these things that are making me or costing me so much money? Like that's something to think about too, right? But the point is, most of us won't just back away from something. We would have to see the math to go, oh yeah, I could, work whatever. I could take on 5 less clients, but I would save X amount of money. Like that could just make sense to do. Like all of it comes back to being willing to like do the math on it. Um, I remember like when I started my business, my dad was like very adamant about this with me. Like he was like, yeah, but like what's the math on you getting another client? Like, does it make sense? How much more in taxes are you gonna have to spend? Da, da, da. And I remember being like, Dad, stop, stop. Like, I just want clients right now. I don't fucking care about the math. Like, I just want more of them. I'm just trying to learn. And like I was right and he was right. Do you know what I mean? Like he was asking the right questions. Like make sure all this fucking makes sense for you. Make sure it's worth your time, your money, your energy, your effort. Da, da, da. And also like I was just in a place where I'm like, I don't even care if it like I spend more on taxes or whatever. Like I just want to learn. But I say all that to say, like, I think taking that on early as a thought process of like, I really do want to see how all of this maths, and I really do want to solve the right problem with it. And I really do want to not just do things because I heard someone else is doing them is really important. And then also applying this to how you look at other people. Again, when you see something, you're like, oh yeah, well, that makes sense because math. I think so many people will see people with like 1 million followers or whatever and be like, ooh, how is she structuring her funnel? Like, how do I copy her funnel? And it's like, her funnel is probably not why that works because math. Do you get what I mean? Because if you have 1 million people obviously not a million people are going to go through a funnel if you have the most followers, right? But like if you have that many people going through a funnel, even if it's converting at 1%, it doesn't matter. But if you're only spending $500 on ads and you're only converting that at 1%, well, that might start to be more of a problem. You get what I mean, right? So you can know this. This is knowable stuff. You can do the math on all of this and it will get so much easier. But like, I've really never seen someone scale where it's like, oh, the math didn't support that or the math doesn't make sense. Like it kind of always comes back to that. So we have to be in the mindset of seeing that as our friend, not our enemy, right? I think instead of being like, oh, I'm bad at numbers or oh, I'm so bad at math or oh, I don't understand all that, we need to be like, wait, that could be like my bestie. Like if I could get that, I could get all this and everything would feel different and better. Like that's the exciting part of this. So numbers can be your friend. They will explain almost everything. And they will definitely tell you what to do next to get the results you want. And of course, all of that's nuanced too. Like just because they tell you what to do, it doesn't mean that's what feels good to you, right? Like we could do the math on Rebecca's ads, and then she might be like, but ultimately ads don't feel good for me. That's fine, but it's still empowering because she still knows that she just chose not to do it because it doesn't make sense for her instead of like because she doesn't get ads or she doesn't know if the math would work or what. Like it's just a different vibe, right? So anyway, I hope this helps. I feel like there are a million rabbit holes I could go down here, so I'm going to stop myself. But maybe we'll do some like math specific ones and do the math on different things if we like dive into like you know one version, like what's the math on retention. But ultimately, it's way simpler than it seems. Hopefully, this was an illustration of that. And yeah, go solve the right problem with it. Cool. Cool. Lily said everything is math. Thank you for this. Even with content and analytics, the numbers tell you everything. Bingo. Always. It's all math. Amazing. Thank you, Lily. I hope you guys have a beautiful week. I won't see you next week. With the holiday, and then I will see you after that. All right. Bye, guys.